Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the really fascinating world of modern rituals. You've given us some truly insightful sources. First, there are excerpts from Modern Rituals, which gives us a look into the services of a civil celebrant, Natalie Hughes Green.
The bespoke services for life's big moments.
Exactly. And second, we have this really thought-provoking essay by Lynn Akeson, Tradition Meets Aesthetics: The Meaning of Modern Rituals.
Yeah, that one really gets into the cultural significance, doesn't it?
It does. So our mission today is to explore why, in a world that seems pretty secular, pretty individualized, why these rites and symbols are, well, not just popular, but often deeply personal.
And how they bridge that gap
Yeah,
between old traditions and what we need today.
precisely.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is how these sources point out a kind of paradox.
A paradox.
Yeah. On one hand, you see this really powerful drive for extreme personalization in ceremonies.
Right.
People choosing their own vows, their own words, readings, music.
Making it their tradition, like Natalie Hughes Cream said.
Exactly, their tradition.
Yeah.
But then, as Lynn Akeson points out, these choices, these very individual choices, they aren't made in a vacuum. They often draw from this, well, surprisingly collective pool of symbols and practices,
Oh, great.
creating what Akeson calls a new ritual paradigm.
So we're not just throwing out the old stuff, we're sort of remixing it for today.
That's a great way to put it, remixing it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. We're going to explore what makes these new ceremonies so powerful. From bespoke weddings and naming ceremonies all the way to end-of-life rituals.
And even those more unique social things, like celebrating a meet cute or marking the end of something significant.
Right, and we'll uncover how, seemingly ordinary things like candles, flowers, music, how they're combined to create these really profound ritual effects.
And why the specific choices, like, say, the color of a coffin or a particular song, why they speak volumes about both the individual and the cultural context.
Yeah. We'll also get into this idea of ritual shopping behavior.
Ah, yes, and the pressure that comes with them.
Exactly. This pressure to create an optimum or, feel-good experience, which kind of surprisingly can lead to experience stress.
It really can.
And we'll look at the roles of these ritual innovators, undertakers, wedding planners.
And how even academic research, anthropology, has subtly shaped what we expect a ritual should do.
Right. So ultimately, you'll see how these modern rituals aren't just like empty aesthetics. They're powerful ways we structure our lives, create meaning.
And define who belongs, and sometimes who doesn't.
Okay, so let's dive into that personalization aspect first. Natalie Hughes Green's work sounds like a perfect example.
It really is. She really emphasizes that by choosing a celebrant, you're basically empowered to choose every single element.
Your own vows, specific words, readings, music, the whole package.
Exactly. Her whole mantra, your love, your day, your way, it's not just catchy. It really is the core of how people are making these rituals, quote, their tradition.
And it's not just the big three: weddings, namings, funerals.
No, not at all. It extends to things like renewal of vows, even digital ceremonies. And she specifically lists the meet cute and celebrating the end as these special social elements.
Wow.
It really shows the breadth of life's passages that people now feel the need to mark with some kind of intentional ritual.
That emphasis on your way, it's so striking. But how does that square with Lynn Akeson's idea of a new ritual paradigm? Is it really just personal preference driving all this?
Well, that's the crucial question, isn't it? Akeson uses this really powerful story, Maria's funeral, to illustrate her point.
Okay.
Maria was 41, died suddenly. Her family, well, they weren't particularly religious, but they weren't against a traditional church setting either.
So kind of in the middle.
Right. But what stands out is how deeply personal every detail became. Went way beyond just standard convention.
Like what?
Okay, imagine a sky blue coffin. That was Maria's favorite color.
Wow, okay.
Decorated with white roses, and a photograph of her in her favorite white linen suit. Even the mourners wore light colors because the family asked them to.
So the driving force wasn't what's traditional, but what would Maria have wanted?
Exactly. That was the key question. But here's Akeson's insight. Right. While they're customizing like crazy, they're not necessarily inventing everything from scratch. They're selecting from that collective pool of symbols and practices we talked about.
Right.
But they're reinterpreting them through this intensely personal lens.
So it's this blend, intensely personal choices layered onto these, maybe sometimes unconsciously chosen, traditional symbols. I'm thinking about Maria's funeral again. The music sounds incredibly eclectic. Traditional hymns mixed with Rod Stewart. How did that work?
It sounds odd on paper, maybe, but it seemed to create a really cohesive effect for them. So yeah, the family chose traditional hymns like Lynn Thandel's Just One Day, One Moment at a Time.
Okay, familiar.
Then Maria's friends sang Just a Closer Walk with Thee. A flute played Taub. A trumpeter played Rod Stewart's I Am Sailing.
I Am Sailing. Wow.
And her students even sang Who Can Sail Without the Wind. The family's goal, they said, was music that was familiar, easy to sing, heartfelt, and light-filled.
Light-filled. I like that.
Yeah. And it really shows how these different elements, even music, are combined in this bespoke way to create a profound ritual effect. Even if, the traditional symbolic meaning isn't always consciously front of mind.
Like the blue coffin, does it have a traditional meaning?
Well, yeah. In an ecclesiastical context, blue can denote the otherworldly, the divine, and roses and lilies are historically linked to the Virgin Mary. A bird can symbolize the soul leaving the body.
Huh. Interesting.
These powerful associations still resonate somehow, even if people aren't explicitly thinking about them.
It sounds like there's this delicate negotiation happening, personal desires meeting traditional symbolism. You mentioned Maria's family was hesitant about the priest doing the traditional 3 scoops of earth.
That's right. It's actually a very common point of discussion, of negotiation.
Hmm.
Maria's family felt it was, well, dirty. They suggested using 3 white lilies instead, something they'd heard others doing.
Okay, so proposing an alternative.
Yeah. But then the priest explained the traditional meaning, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And suddenly for them, it wasn't dirty anymore. It became a meaningful ritual ingredient.
Ah, so understanding the meaning changed their perspective.
Exactly. It shows there can be flexibility. Tradition isn't always rigid, and people today are often open to it if the meaning is communicated well.
Right.
And similarly, having the children light candles for their mother near the end of the service, that kind of active participation, it transforms the whole experience.
From just watching to actually engaging.
Deeply engaging. It's not passive observance anymore.
That idea of active participation, selecting elements, it brings us to what Aucassin calls ritual shopping behavior. Now, that phrase shopping, it might sound a bit casual, maybe even superficial, like people are just picking things off a shelf, buying the right without the ideology.
Right, that's often the critique you hear.
But Aucassin pushes back on that. She argues it's not necessarily some modern failing or sign of ignorance. She points out that even in the past, people were pretty flexible with how they used symbols and ritual elements. Think about folk medicine or magic. They didn't always stick strictly to theological rules.
That's a really important point. The flexibility isn't entirely new.
So what is new?
Well, Aucassin argues the real shift is how explicit this assembly of meaning has become and how personally driven it is now.
Okay, explicit and personal.
Exactly. And this connects to what the anthropologist Catherine Bell describes about the new ritual paradigm. It fundamentally shifts the focus of ritual.
How so?
Historically, rituals often reinforced local power structures, local worldviews. Today, there's a much stronger drive towards something seen as more universal, common to all humanity.
More universal.
And this is a really significant point. Society is increasingly defined from the self, rather than the self being defined by society.
Okay, I see. So Maria's funeral, the focus was squarely on Maria, her individual life, her connections.
Precisely. The personal connection to Maria was paramount. It wasn't primarily about, say, the church's broader message or the communion of saints.
Right.
And this shift means the ritual's legitimacy, its success, really hinges on its ability to affect people emotionally, to provide that feel-good effect or an experience over and above the ordinary.
And that demand for emotional impact for the optimum experience, that's where the pressure comes in. It opens people up to disappointment.
Absolutely. It leads directly to what Axon calls experience stress.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, who hasn't felt that pressure trying to pick the perfect restaurant for a special occasion? Now scale that up to a wedding or a funeral.
Exactly. If the officiant is boring or the music's off-key or even if the refreshments are just dull,
the whole ritual experience can feel ruined, even if technically everything was done correctly.
Right. And this pressure, this need for a perfect experience, has fueled the rise of these ritual innovators.
The undertakers, the wedding planners.
Yes. The undertaker profession, for instance, has changed significantly. They're now experts at guiding families through this growing menu of symbols and activities. They might suggest things like the children lighting candles, knowing it's perceived as a powerful ritual action that fosters that deep emotional engagement.
Got it.
And undertakers aren't alone. The wedding industry is massive, just full of innovations, flowers, limos, venues, all showcased at huge expos. These organizers, they use this almost intuitive flair to try and satisfy that intense need for an authentic emotional experience.
What I find really fascinating is how even academic research has kind of seeped into this and shaped our expectations.
How do you mean?
Well, Bell notes that in places like the US and UK, popularized ideas from anthropologists like Victor Turner or Clifford Geertz about the ritual process have led people to expect rituals to act like a kind of social alchemy.
Creating deep kinship, connecting people to each other and to nature.
Exactly. And while maybe Sweden, for example, has different death customs, like preferring a more natural look for the deceased, a lot of the new ritual features, especially around elaborate weddings, still seem to flow from the US.
That makes sense. Cultural trends often cross borders.
And even researchers like Lynn Atkinson herself admit that their own findings about modern funerals have been picked up in public discussion. So, in a way, the research itself starts legitimizing and even shaping contemporary ritual practices.
It's a feedback loop, almost. Research observes practice. Practice gets influenced by the observation.
Yeah. So ultimately, what these sources are showing us is that rites, fundamentally, they distinguish.
They set moments apart.
Right. They separate certain developments from the everyday grind, marking them with seriousness, stillness, reflection.
And seemingly ordinary things, candles, flowers, music, get combined in these new ways to create a unified ritual effect.
And space matters too, doesn't it?
Hugely. A church is already ritually charged, obviously. It contrasts with everyday spaces. But even carefully chosen outdoor sites, or homes transformed with flowers and special arrangements, they take on this powerful, almost sacred symbolism for the event.
And beyond distinguishing the everyday from the ritual, these ceremonies also, well, they distinguish among people.
Yes, that's the belonging aspect, which can be complicated.
It really can. The rite unites those who participate, definitely. But it can also really painfully highlight who's excluded.
Oh, absolutely. Not being invited to a wedding or a confirmation, or even just hearing about a funeral after it's already happened.
That can cause real hurt, real bitterness.
And that challenge, defining who belongs and who doesn't, be incredibly tricky for organizers who are aiming for that positive, feel-good experience for everyone included.
It's a real tension there.
So if we try to connect this all to the bigger picture, what we've really discussed today shows that modern rituals are this dynamic blend. They're a mix of deep personal expression and these equally deep embedded cultural patterns.
From the celebrant's practical ability to tailor ceremonies, your love, your day, your way.
Right. To those nuanced shifts in ritual, meaning that someone like Catherine Bell identifies, that move from local to universal, defining society from the self. These practices are constantly evolving. They aren't just about following fixed rules anymore.
It's much more about creating meaning, right? And emotional engagement.
Exactly. Distinguishing moments from the everyday, bringing people together.
Even if sometimes, that process painfully defines who's in and who's out.
These are rich, complex performances. They embody our modern values. Individuality, choice, emotional authenticity.
And that constant blend of innovation and tradition. So what does this all mean for you listening? We've seen how every little detail, from the color of a coffin to a song choice, can carry immense weight, personal weight, cultural weight, even if the old traditional symbolic meaning isn't something people are consciously thinking about.
Yeah, these modern rituals, they seem to satisfy a really fundamental human need, a need to mark life's passages, to find connection in a world that often feels pretty fragmented.
It does, which raises, I think, an important question for you to ponder. In a society like ours that really embraces pluralism, individual choice, yet at the same time often seems to experience this longing for maybe unifying principles, clear moral rules. How might the rituals we create keep reflecting that tension?
That fascinating tension between personal freedom and collective belonging. How will we navigate that going forward?
Something to think about.